What if I told you that the moment activists stormed a church in Minnesota, the clock started ticking on federal arrests?
Here, look, hugging his kid.
Did you ever think you would see anything like this in the United States of America?
Religious liberty is under siege in our country right now, and we are not going anywhere until those people who did those acts are held accountable.
Moments ago, the AG Pam Bondi posted this. Minutes ago, at my direction, HSI and FBI agents executed an arrest in Minnesota. So far, we have arrested Nakima Levy-Armstrong. So far. Okay, we'll come back to that.
Come and get me, Pam Bondi.
All right, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, just granted his request.
Let's go. Update, second arrest has been made at my direction.
In Minnesota, at least 3 people have been arrested in connection with a protest inside a church last Sunday.
No one is above the law.
And they didn't even know it. Now, the story starts with President Donald J. Trump, his Attorney General Pam Bondi, and the full force of the Department of Justice. Not with warnings, not with statements, with action. Because within 48 hours of a church being overrun during worship in Minnesota, the FBI and ICE were executing arrests. And that wasn't an accident. A lot of Americans feel like the rules only apply one way. You know, you watch chaos unfold, you hear excuses dressed up as activism, and you're told to just accept it. Families in that church were told the same thing until the service was shut down, exits were blocked, and intimidation replaced speech. Here's the part that most people are missing, though. This wasn't about politics, immigration, or even protest rights anymore. The moment a place of worship was targeted, federal civil rights law kicked in. And under Donald J. Trump's DOJ, that line isn't theoretical, it's enforced. Now, I'm gonna walk you through exactly why Minnesota became ground zero, why the FACE Act suddenly mattered, and why this incident forced a federal response that's only just beginning. This wasn't a protest, and the arrests prove it. Stick with me, guys, because once you see how fast this escalated, you're gonna understand why everything just changed. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate you guys. This is where the story fundamentally changes, okay? The moment activists entered a church during an active worship service, this stopped being a local protest issue and it became a federal civil rights case. Churches are not just symbolic institutions. They are explicitly protected spaces under federal law. This is very important here, okay? When worship is obstructed, congregants are intimidated or even exits being blocked. Prosecutors don't need political intent. They only need proof that people were prevented from exercising a constitutional right. That's the part many activists either ignored or misunderstood. Chanting inside of a sanctuary, confronting clergy, and forcing a service to shut down isn't speech, it is interference. Under the law, interference triggers federal jurisdiction automatically. Now, this wasn't about like who the protesters opposed. It was about where they took their action. So once that threshold was crossed, the case no longer belonged to city officials or county prosecutors. It belonged to Washington. That's why this escalated fast. Now, the speed is the story here. Within, roughly 48 hours of the church disruption in Minnesota, the Department of Justice was already moving in. Now, that doesn't happen by accident, okay? That happens when enforcement posture is already set and the evidence fits cleanly into an existing legal framework. Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi didn't issue a warning. She didn't call a press conference asking for calm. She authorized action. Federal agents didn't show up to observe and look around and just kind of like be there present. They showed up to arrest people. And so that distinction matters because it signals something larger. The DOJ under President Donald J. Trump is not treating these incidents as gray area activism. They're treating them as clear violations. And so when the federal government responds this quickly, it means that the internal question wasn't if arrests were justified, it's how soon. And once that decision is made, everything downstream moves fast. Now, this pattern that you're watching right now, it's not limited to law enforcement. When a lot of people quietly start doing the same thing, it usually is not panic. It's pattern recognition. Now, this is exactly what's happening right now with retirees. Instead of blindly trusting that the Medicare plan they picked years ago will still hold up, people are reviewing their coverage before something breaks, before a bill surprises them, and before a doctor suddenly isn't covered. Nobody announces it. There's no headline, but you can see the shift. Most people already noticed the risk. Most people already decided not to wait. And this is why so many people are calling the phone number on the bottom of your screen right now, 909-563-8279, or they're clicking the link right now in the description to go to askchapter.org/Ron, not to change everything, but just to make sure nothing is being missed. Because the worst time to find out that your coverage has gaps is after you need it. All right, so let's keep this going because the next part, this is where the story gets even bigger. Okay, now most people, they hear FACE Act, not Facebook, I mean FACE Act, and they assume that it only applies to abortion clinics. Now that misunderstanding is exactly why this blew up so fast. The Freedom of Access to Clinics Entrances Act also protects religious exercise. It prohibits force, threats, or physical obstruction that interferes with someone's ability to worship freely, period.
As you can see, all these pretend Christians, all these comfortable white people who are living lavish, comfortable lives while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're living real life, nice lives with your lattes, doing absolutely nothing for your Latino and Somali brothers and sisters. You come here to a man wearing a suit. Is a preacher? Did Jesus wear a suit? Did Jesus profit off the words? No! Jesus would dine with immigrants. Do not touch me. Touch me again and see what happens.
They should be thrown out immediately. I don't think that it's right to be protesting negativity in the churches. When you're in church, you're supposed to be there to be closer to God and to be on your walk with faith.
Hey, you are a fake Christian. Why are you not standing with your Somali and Latino communities? Why do I not see you out at Whipple every day protesting this attack on humanity? Where are you? You're sinners. You're pretending to be Christians. But we know you live an easy life, don't you? A very easy life while people are starving. Shame.
I would just say one word about it. It's downright disgusting.
Out now. Out now.
Have respect for people and just respect for yourselves, respect for others, no matter what their religion is or what they believe. And I think that's, even as Christians, we're called to do that as well, to respect other people's religion and what they believe.
Living real comfortable while the people starve. Living real comfortable while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're all living real comfortable, aren't you? Shame on you. Do something. Stand with the Somalis. Stand with the Latinos. Quit ignoring this injustice.
It's very disturbing at the churches as well. It's just go somewhere else. Do it somewhere else.
He wears a suit and tie and he hangs out with Kristi Noem. How is that a Christian? You're supposed to accept all immigrants, are you not? Why are you not going down to Whipple and joining us in protest against this inhumanity? You claim to be a Christian, act like one.
The hypocrisy here is thick, and I would say that what we have here is a situation where rights were violated. Those rights need to be protected, and there is a law here that can be accessed to ensure those protections. We are thankful that the Department of Justice is moving swiftly to make sure that happens, and the church will continue to evaluate their legal options to make sure that churches in Minnesota, and especially City's Church, are protected. The hypocrisy.
It's very simple. So activists assume that they were operating in a protest gray zone, but they were not. The law doesn't care what slogan you're chanting or what cause you claim. It cares whether people were prevented or being prevented from entering, exiting, or continuing a protected activity. So once exits were blocked, worship was disrupted and families were intimidated. The legal threshold was met at this point. This is why there was no prolonged debate inside the DOJ. The statute fit cleanly. The evidence was public and enforcement didn't require a novel interpretation, just action. This wasn't a new law being stretched. This was an old law finally being used exactly as it was written. Now, this is where the narrative collapses for the activists involved. Protest is protected, obstruction is not. The moment that behavior crosses into like blocking doors and surrounding individuals, confronting clergy during worship, or forcing a service to shut down, prosecutors have everything that they need.
This is the beginning of what's going to happen here. When you violate people's due process, when you pull people off the street, you start dragging them and hurting them and not abiding by the Constitution, when you start doing all of that, people get upset and angry. And if you remember what the Civil Rights Movement was about, the Civil Rights Movement was about these very kinds of protests. There's nothing in the Constitution that tells you what time you can protest. You can protest at any time. That's the whole point of it, is to disrupt, it's to make uncomfortable. And that's what they're doing. And that's what I believe when I say everyone has to be willing to sacrifice something. You have to make people uncomfortable in these times. If you see how uncomfortable people uncomfortably.
Criminal charges aren't built on slogans, they're built on actions. Blocking exits creates confinement risk, and intimidation establishes coercion. Disrupting a worship service establishes interference with constitutional rights. I mean, you don't even need violence for any of that. You just need the conduct that removes choice from the other people. And that's why calling this peaceful really didn't matter. Video evidence, witness statements, and timing told a completely different story. Activism stopped being expressive and it started being restrictive. And under federal law, that's the pivot point. Once that line is crossed, intent becomes secondary. Conduct becomes everything. Now, this didn't land in Minnesota by coincidence. Minnesota sits at the very fault line where aggressive sanctuary policies collide with renewed federal enforcement. Now, for years, state and city leaders treated immigration resistance as a political theater situation, assuming Washington didn't push back. Now, that assumption collapsed the moment a church became the target. Now, from the DOJ's perspective, Minnesota offered a clean test case, clear evidence, public video, and local officials already on record opposing federal cooperation. So when activists crossed into a protected space, federal authority didn't need to negotiate with local politics anymore. Jurisdiction snapped into place immediately. This is why pressure concentrated here first. Not because Minnesota is unique ideologically, but because it was legally exposed. Once a state creates distance from federal enforcement while tolerating obstruction, it becomes vulnerable the moment an incident meets federal thresholds. Minnesota wasn't unlucky. It was structurally primed for this. So here's the signal that most people overlook. This wasn't handled by one agency. The Department of Justice coordinated with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement almost immediately. Now, this tells you that the government viewed this as more than just some local disturbance. This was a rights enforcement operation. Multi-agency coordination only happens when lines are clear and authority is settled. FBI handles civil rights and interstate implications. ICE brings the enforcement context activists were protesting in the first place. DOJ sets the legal strategy. And when those pieces move together, it means the case fits cleanly across jurisdictions. This is also why arrests happen before narratives could harden. Coordination compresses timelines. Evidence moved faster. Decisions were centralized. This wasn't improvisation, it was execution. And once that machine turns on, it doesn't stop because of press pressure or political noise. Now, there's this parallel here that a lot of people feel right now, even if they don't even say it out loud. The problem isn't that you don't work hard enough. It's that your income doesn't keep paying you. Every dollar comes in, gets absorbed by bills, and then like next month, you're right back at zero. Same effort, same pressure, nothing carries forward. There's no momentum. And after a while, that grind wears you down and you're just like, ugh, thank God it's Friday. Oh God, it's Monday, right? This is not a motivation issue. This is a structural one. Flywheel Income Society exists for people who are done restarting financially. It's built around systems that compound, income that stacks instead of resets. And so when progress starts carrying forward, the pressure eases, decisions get clearer, momentum becomes permanent instead of fragile. Now, if you're tired of income that disappears the moment you earn it, or even worse, the moment you stop working, Flywheel Income Society is the exit. Click the link down below, join me on the other side. Now, let's get back to the story because once federal enforcement escalates, the consequences don't stop with arrests. So a warning shot comes with press conferences, vague statements, and calls for dialogue. This one didn't. The Department of Justice under Pam Bondi skipped symbolism and went straight to arrests. That distinction matters because it marks a shift in how federal authority is being used under President Donald J. Trump. Now, for years, activists learned a pattern: create disruption, generate headlines, and wait for prosecutors to hesitate. That pattern just collapsed here. There was no negotiation off-ramp. There was no cooling period. There was no request for voluntary compliance. Federal agents executed arrests because the evidence already satisfied the law. That was it. That's enforcement. And enforcement changes behavior far more effectively than rhetoric ever could. When activists realize consequences are immediate, not theoretical, the calculation changes overnight. This wasn't meant to send a message. It was meant to end conduct. And once that precedent is set, it doesn't need to be repeated loudly to be felt everywhere. Arrests are serious. Subpoenas are seismic. So when federal investigators issue subpoenas, they're no longer asking what happened. They're examining who may have enabled it. This is why the names matter. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, and Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, they didn't become part of the story by accident. Subpoenas signal potential obstruction, not political disagreement. Prosecutors only move in that direction when they believe actions or inactions may have interfered with federal law enforcement. Now, at that point, the issue is not ideology, it's compliance. This is where the pressure shifts from activists to institutions. So once officials are inside the investigative scope, everything tightens. Communications matters, decisions matter, timing matters. And the political shift, the political shield that once protected local leaders, it no longer applies the same way when federal statutes are at play. Now, here's where this gets really uncomfortable for a lot of people. The statutes being dusted off are not even new. They're old. I mean, some of these date back all the way to the Civil War era. Laws designed for moments where normal order breaks down and constitutional rights are under direct threat. The same legal tools once used in January 6 cases are now being applied right here, and that symmetry matters. It tells activists something that they didn't expect to hear. The law doesn't care which side you're on. If your conduct obstructs rights, intimidates citizens, or interferes with federal authority, the same statutes apply. No carve-outs, no ideological exemptions. This is why this rattles networks built on assumed immunity. These laws carry serious penalties and broad reach. Once prosecutors decide that they fit, the case stops being about one incident and it starts being about precedent. And precedent is what reshapes behavior nationwide. Out of all of the places activists could have chosen, a church changed everything. Attacks on worship, they don't stay confined to one political lane. They trigger bipartisan intolerance because they hit something foundational: freedom of belief, assembly, and conscience. This is why this escalated way beyond immigration debates almost instantly. I mean, you can argue policy, you can argue borders, but when families are disrupted during worship, during Sunday school, I mean, like, the public reaction hardens fast. Prosecutors know that, judges know that, and lawmakers know that too. Churches are not just symbolic targets, they're legal tripwires. Once crossed, enforcement accelerates because the harm is clear and the protection is explicit. This is why this incident didn't fade into the news cycle. It flipped a switch. And once that switch was flipped, the response isn't political anymore. This is institutional. So here's a rule change that caught activists flat-footed. The era of assumption ended. Now, for years, the operating belief was simple: disrupt loudly, claim moral authority, and consequences will be delayed, diluted, or disappear entirely. That belief just broke. Once federal civil rights law is triggered, there's no rewind button. You can't reframe it as passion. You can't relabel it as a protest. The legal classification locks the moment in place. Enforcement doesn't care about intent narratives. Statutes don't respond to hashtags. This is why this moment matters more than individuals realized. The enforcement line is now visible. Everyone can see it. And once people see a line enforced, behavior changes. Not because of speeches, but because of outcomes. This wasn't symbolic. This was corrective. And it can't be walked back without dismantling the very laws that protect everyone. So what you're watching is not a single crackdown. This is a sequence. Arrest first, subpoenas next, broader accountability after that. Federal enforcement works in layers, not bursts. Each action sets up the next, tightening the legal environment step by step. This is why this didn't stop at one incident or one location. Once a pattern is established and statutes are applied successfully, investigators don't retreat, they expand. Not emotionally, procedurally. The machine moves forward because it's designed to. And that's the final takeaway. This wasn't about sending a message to activists. This was about restoring a boundary that had been ignored for just way too long. When that boundary is enforced once, it doesn't need to be announced again. The signal's already out there. The arrests have begun, and now you know why.